Hello, and thank you for joining me. If you are living in the United States and you have celebrated your 60th birthday, this report is critical for your weekly grocery budget and the stability of your retirement funds. In 2026, we often think of Canada as America's quiet, reliable neighbor, but a seismic event has just taken place in Beijing, one that Washington watched happen but could not stop. This event could cause the price of food and vehicles here in the US to climb significantly in the coming months. Why does a meeting in China affect your life here at home? Please stay with me, and we will analyze exactly what is happening. To help you navigate this complex story, I want to guide you through the key points we will discuss today. First, we will uncover the real reason why Canada, our closest ally, has signed a massive trade deal with China, breaking decades of tradition. Second, we will look at how the current administration's tariff policies accelerated this decision. And third, we will dedicate a significant portion of this video to explaining a concept called supply chain paralysis, and exactly how it impacts your cost of living, from the bread on your table to the car in your driveway. Let's begin by looking at the facts of Friday, January 16, 2026. The Canadian Prime Minister made a decision that historians and economists are calling a turning point for North America. For 75 years, we have operated on one assumption: the US and Canadian economies are locked together. We don't just trade, we build things together. But that rulebook has just been thrown out. Canada has signed a comprehensive agreement with China. The details are striking. Canada agreed to slash tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles from 100% down to just 6.1%. In exchange, China is reopening its doors to Canadian agriculture, specifically lowering tariffs on canola seed and wheat. You might ask, why would Canada do this when the US is trying to keep Chinese vehicles out? The answer is survival. Canadian farmers were facing bankruptcy because they couldn't sell their crops, and they felt they received no relief from Washington. So, they found a new buyer. Now, I want to pause here. It is easy to hear about tariffs and trade deals and think of them as abstract political games, but I want to take the next few minutes to explain something much more serious, something that experts are calling supply chain paralysis. This is the part of the story that poses the biggest risk to the American economy, and specifically to those of us on fixed incomes. When we talk about trade between the US and Canada, we aren't just talking about selling finished products back and forth. We are talking about an economic architecture. Think about the car you drive. That vehicle likely wasn't just made in America or made in Canada. A single car part might cross the border 7 or 8 times before the car is finished. The steel crosses north, is stamped into a frame, comes south for assembly, goes north for electronics, and comes back south to the dealership. This system works because the border is invisible to business. It is frictionless. But what happens when you introduce uncertainty? This is where the danger lies. It is not just about the tariffs themselves. It is about the fear of tariffs. This creates what we call the freeze. Imagine you are a business owner in Detroit or a grain elevator operator in Montana. You hear that the USMCA trade agreement that governs all this movement is under review in July 2026. You hear threats that the US might walk away from it entirely because Canada made this deal with China. What do? You stop. You stop investing. You stop hiring. You stop signing long-term contracts. This is paralysis. It is not a sudden heart attack. It is, as the old saying goes, death by 1,000 cuts. Let's look at agriculture, which affects your grocery bill. The North American grain system is built on efficiency. We have rail networks that move wheat from the Canadian prairies down to US mills without stopping. We have storage facilities built on the assumption that grain can flow freely. If the US administration decides to punish Canada for this China deal by blocking agricultural imports, those systems break. The grain elevators become what we call stranded assets, worthless buildings because the grain can't move. But here's the immediate problem for you. The wheat is stuck. American bakeries, cereal manufacturers, and food processors suddenly face a shortage. They couldn't just buy American overnight because the domestic supply chains are unset up to replace that massive volume instantly. So, what happens? Prices spike, and they don't just go up a little, they become volatile. For a senior citizen budgeting for the month, seeing the price of bread, pasta, or cereal jump 15% or 20% is a real hardship. Furthermore, let's talk about the automotive sector. This new deal allows Chinese electric vehicles into Canada, The US government worries these cars will leak across the border. If Washington responds by inspecting every truck coming from Canada or imposing new taxes on Canadian auto parts, the cost of vehicle maintenance rises. If you are driving a car that is 5 or 10 years old, you rely on affordable parts to keep it running. If the supply chain freezes, parts become scarce. A simple repair that used to take 2 days and cost $300 might suddenly take 3 weeks and cost $600. This paralysis creates an uncertainty tax. Companies, fearing they won't be able to get goods later, will raise prices now to build up cash reserves. They build buffers of inventory, which is expensive, and they pass that cost on to you. So, when you see headlines about trade wars, I don't want you to think about politicians shaking hands or shouting at press conferences. I want you to think about the friction being poured into the gears of the economy. Friction causes heat, and in economics, that heat is inflation. For those of us who remember the inflation of the late 70s or the recent post-pandemic spike, we know that once prices go up, they rarely come back down. This is the hidden cost of the diplomatic freeze we are witnessing. Now that we understand the mechanism, let's summarize the 3 direct impacts on your daily life in 2026. First, grocery inflation. As I mentioned, disruptions in the grain and agricultural transport networks will likely lead to higher shelf prices for staples. If you are on Social Security, your COLA cost of living adjustment is calculated based on past data, which means it often lags behind real-time price hikes. You may feel the pinch at the checkout line long before your check adjusts. Second, healthcare and durable goods. Many medical devices and pharmaceutical precursors also rely on integrated global supply chains. While not the center of this specific dispute, the general friction in trade can slow down the movement of essential medical supplies, potentially raising costs or causing delays in filling prescriptions. Third, market volatility. Uncertainty is the enemy of the stock market. If big companies cannot plan for the future because they don't know the trade rules, their stock prices swing wildly. If you have a 401k or an IRA, you might see uncomfortable drops in your balance. This is not the time to panic, but it is the time to be aware. In this landscape of uncertainty, what can you do? Here are 3 prudent steps. 1. Watch the calendar. Keep an eye on July 2026. That is when the USMCA review happens. The months leading up to it will be volatile. 2. Pantry preparation. I am not suggesting you panic buy, but when you see non-perishable staples on sale, pasta, rice, canned goods, it is wise to pick up a little extra. It is a hedge against future price spikes. 3. Conservative money management. If you rely on your investment portfolio for income, speak with your financial advisor about defensive positioning. In times of trade wars, preserving your principal is often more important than chasing high returns. To conclude, the handshake between Canada and China is not just a diplomatic photo-op. It is a signal that the stable, predictable world we have known for decades is changing. The supply chains are being redrawn, and unfortunately, the consumer often pays the price for the architect's renovation. I will continue to monitor the price of commodities and the political rhetoric coming out of Washington. My goal is to help you separate the noise from the news that actually affects your wallet. If you found this analysis helpful, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It helps us grow and keep you informed. Thank you for your time. Stay safe and watch your budget carefully. I'll see you in the next report.